Let us begin together, right here, right now. No matter where you are or what the day has held for you, let this moment be a sanctuary. Join me and take a long, slow, deep breath in, filling your lungs from the very bottom to the top, feeling your chest and belly expand. And now, release it all with a gentle, audible sigh. Let the weight of the world fall from your shoulders with that breath. As you find a position of comfort, perhaps you can let me know in the quiet of your own mind where you are in the world. What time is it on your clock? Is the moon hanging high in your sky, or is the sun painting the horizon with its morning colors? We connect in this moment, a global community seeking stillness together. If you feel comfortable, allow your eyelids to grow heavy and gently close. Let my voice be your guide as we journey back, not just in time, but into the very heart of what it means to be human. In the prosperous kingdom of Kosala, ruled by the just king Pasenadi, a shadow had fallen. It was a terror so profound that it emptied the highways, silenced the marketplaces, and bolted the doors of every home. It was not a famine or a plague, but a man. A single man who haunted the dense Jalini forest, a predator who moved with terrifying speed and skill. No one who entered the forest came out alive. Merchants rerouted their caravans on long, arduous detours. Villagers living on the forest's edge abandoned their homes, leaving their fields to fallow. Even the king's most hardened soldiers, sent in platoons to capture him, never returned. The man had a name, whispered in hushed, fearful tones, Angulimala, which meant the one with the garland of fingers. For this was his horrifying signature. After each kill, he would sever a finger from his victim and add it to a grotesque necklace he wore, a macabre counting of his dreadful deeds. The garland was a testament to his savagery, a symbol of the darkness that had consumed him. The terror was absolute. Now, let us pause here. Let yourself feel the stillness that fear creates. The held breath, the silent streets. It is a false peace, a peace born of absence. Breathe into that feeling and then let it go, knowing that we are merely observers, safe in our own space. The story of Angulimala, however, did not begin in darkness. It began in light. He was the son of the king's own chaplain and was given the name Ahimsaka, which means the harmless one. And he was true to his name. He was a brilliant student, physically powerful, and possessed of a gentle, obedient nature. He excelled at everything he did. Sent to the renowned university at Taxila, he quickly became the most favored student of the head guru. He was so bright, so capable, so dedicated, that he outshone all his peers. And it was this very light that cast the first shadow. His fellow students, consumed by a bitter jealousy, conspired against him. They could not beat him in scholarship, so they decided to destroy him through deceit. They went to their guru, one by one, and planted seeds of poison. "Master," one would say, "we have seen Ahimsaka speaking privately with your wife. His manner is too familiar." Another would add, "I fear he has ambitions beyond his station. He speaks as if he will one day be the master of this school." They created a web of lies so intricate, so convincing, that the guru, a man prone to suspicion, finally believed them. He saw his brightest student as a threat, a viper he had nurtured in his own home. But he could not simply expel him or kill him, for Ahimsaka was too strong and well-loved. So the guru devised a terrible, twisted genius. He called Ahimsaka to him and said, "My son, your studies are complete. You are ready to graduate. But there is one final Guru Dakshina, a concluding gift of honor, that you must give me before you can be free." Ahimsaka, ever obedient, bowed low. "Anything you ask, master. I am your devoted student." The Guru's eyes were cold. He said, "To complete your initiation, you must bring me a garland of 1,000 human fingers, one finger from 1,000 different people. Do this, and your education will be perfected." Ahimsaka was horrified. "Master, I am Ahimsaka, the harmless one. My family are Brahmins. We do not take life. How can you ask this of me?" But the Guru was insistent. "This is the final test of your devotion. It is a secret esoteric teaching, the meaning of which you will understand upon its completion. Refuse, and you will have failed me utterly, and you will carry the curse of an ungrateful student." Ahimsaka's mind was a battlefield. His entire being recoiled from the monstrous task, yet his entire life had been conditioned to obey his guru without question.
To defy his teacher was a sin more profound than he could imagine. Trapped between an impossible command and an unthinkable disobedience, his brilliant mind began to fracture. The Guru's word, to him, was absolute truth. He believed there must be some hidden, profound meaning he was too ignorant to grasp. And so, with a heart shattered by conflict, the gentle Ahimsaka made his choice. He chose obedience. He left the university, took up a sword, and went into the Jalini forest. The first kill nearly destroyed him. The act of violence was so alien to his nature that his body and mind rebelled. But the vow was a fire in his brain. He had to continue. And with each subsequent killing, a part of him died. The gentle, brilliant scholar Ahimsaka was buried under layers of trauma, guilt, and a hardening shell of brutality. He ceased to be Ahimsaka. He became the monster the world would call Angulimala. He lost count of the days, the weeks, the months. His only measure of time was the growing, horrifying garland around his neck. He became a creature of pure, instinctual violence, his mind focused on a single, terrible goal: 1,000 fingers. His skill as a hunter grew, his senses sharpened, his humanity withered away. He was now close. The garland was heavy on his chest, a stinking, gruesome record of his deeds. He had counted them: 999. He needed only one more. The forest was empty. The surrounding lands were deserted. No one dared come near. His desperation grew into a frantic, feverish madness. He needed to complete his task. He needed the final finger to finally be free from this nightmare, to present his gift to his guru and end this hell. It was on that day, as he stood on a high rock scanning the empty landscape, a man consumed by his own darkness, that he saw two figures on the road far below. One was a lone traveler, walking towards the forest, a man in a saffron robe, moving with an impossible calm. The other was a woman, walking from the direction of the city, calling out a name. He recognized the woman's voice. It was his mother, coming to warn him that the king's army was preparing one final, massive assault. The choice was before him. The calm monk was an easy target. But in his madness, a twisted thought arose. His vow did not specify whose finger it must be. If he killed his own mother, he would complete his task and potentially save her from being caught in the crossfire of the king's attack. The darkness in him had grown so complete that he was now on the verge of matricide, one of the heaviest and most unforgivable karmic sins. He raised his sword and began to move towards his mother.
This is the edge of the abyss, the moment of ultimate darkness before the dawn. It is here, at the point of no return, that the Buddha's own story intersects with that of the monster. This is where the true transformation begins. Let us take a steadying breath as we step into this pivotal moment. Breathe in calm and breathe out any tension that may have gathered. We are now walking the path with the Buddha towards the heart of the storm. The figure in the saffron robe, walking with such serene, unhurried purpose towards the forest of terror, was of course the Buddha. He had heard the stories of Angulimala, but where others saw a monster to be destroyed, the Buddha, with his clairvoyant wisdom, saw something else. He saw the flicker of the brilliant, gentle ahimsaka still buried deep within the killer's heart. He saw the chain of causes and conditions, the jealousy of his peers, the guru's cruel betrayal, the unbearable psychic conflict that had forged the monster. And he saw that this was a pivotal day. He saw the two paths stretching before Angulimala, the path of matricide, which would plunge him into an almost irredeemable hell, and another, almost impossibly narrow path towards liberation. And he knew that he had to be there to open that second path. So as Angulimala raised his sword and began to descend the rock towards his own mother, the Buddha placed himself directly in the way. He simply continued his slow, mindful walk along the path that led between the killer and his intended victim. Angulimala saw this. A surge of rage and frustration went through him. This monk, this foolish, arrogant monk, daring to walk in his forest. He was an easier target than his mother. The final finger was right there, a gift. He changed his course, his feet flying over the rocky ground, his sword held high. "Stop, monk, stop," he roared, his voice a sound that had frozen the blood of countless victims. But the Buddha did not stop. He did not slow down. He did not speed up. He just continued to walk, his pace even and graceful. This infuriated Angulimala. He was the fastest man in the kingdom, a predator whose speed was legendary. He began to run, pouring all his strength into his legs, determined to catch this insolent monk. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala could not catch him. He ran and ran, his lungs burning, his legs aching, the heavy garland of fingers bouncing grotesquely against his chest, but the distance between them remained exactly the same. It was as if he were running on a treadmill, trapped in a nightmare where his greatest effort yielded no result. Let yourself feel that sensation of frantic, pointless effort, the feeling of running as hard as you can but getting nowhere. It is the very definition of suffering, of being trapped in a cycle. Breathe and let that feeling of struggle dissolve. Finally, exhausted, bewildered, and his rage turning to a kind of madness, Angulimala screamed at the top of his lungs, "Stop, monk! I command you to stand still!" At this, the Buddha, without breaking his stride, turned his head slightly and spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried with a calm authority that cut through the forest's silence and Angulimala's rage. "I have stopped, Angulimala," he said. "It is you who have not stopped." Angulimala skidded to a halt, confused. The monk was clearly still walking. "What lies are these, monk?" he panted, leaning on his sword. "You are still walking, yet you say you have stopped. I am standing still, yet you say I have not. What do you mean?" The Buddha finally paused in his walk and turned to face the killer fully. He stood there, unarmed, radiating a peace so powerful it seemed to create a tangible field around him. His gaze was direct, compassionate, and utterly fearless. "Angulimala," he said, his voice calm and clear,
I have stopped forever. I have stopped harming living beings. I have laid down the sword. But you have not stopped. You have not stopped the violence against others, and you have not stopped the violence against your own heart. Your mind is still running, still caught in the cycle of killing and suffering. It is you who must stop. The words struck Angulimala like a physical blow. No one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever stood before him without cowering. No one had ever spoken his name without trembling. But this monk, he spoke with such truth, such clarity, it was as if a lightning bolt had pierced the dense fog of his madness. For the first time in years, a thought that was not about killing or survival entered his mind. I have stopped harming. It is you who have not stopped. In that one moment, in the presence of the Buddha's immense, fearless compassion, the layers of brutality began to crack. He looked at the serene face of the monk, and then he looked down at his own hands, stained with the blood of 999 souls. He looked at the grotesque garland hanging from his neck, and for the first time, he saw it for what it was. Not a symbol of his vow, not a gift for his guru, but a monument to his own profound defilement. The full weight of his actions, a mountain of horror that he had suppressed for years, came crashing down upon him. He saw the faces of his victims, he felt their terror, he heard their pleas. He was overwhelmed by a wave of revulsion and remorse so powerful that it brought him to his knees. The brilliant mind of Ahimsika, buried for so long, broke through the surface. He saw the cruel deception of his guru. He saw his own foolish, blind obedience. He saw the monster he had become. A great shattering sob tore from his throat. It was the sound of a man's soul breaking open. He threw his sword to the ground. It clattered on the rocks, the sound echoing the shattering of his old identity. "O monk!"
He wept, his face buried in his hands. "You have come to this forest for the sake of one who was lost in a great darkness. You have tamed me without a stick or a sword. What can I do? How can I ever undo what I have done?" The Buddha walked to him and stood before the weeping, broken man. "The past is like a burnt seed, Angulimala," he said gently. "It cannot be unburnt, but it also cannot sprout again. What matters is the seed you plant now, in this moment. The path of harming is at an end. A new path can begin." With trembling hands, Angulimala reached up and broke the cord of his ghastly necklace. The 999 fingers fell to the dust in a heap. It was the final act of renunciation. He prostrated himself at the Buddha's feet. The great, terrifying murderer, now as helpless as a child. "Take me with you," he begged. "Let me follow the path you speak of. Let me spend whatever life I have left trying to untangle the evil I have wrought." And so the Buddha led Angulimala from the forest. As they walked, they passed his mother, who had hidden in fear when she saw her son with the strange monk. She saw her son, his sword gone, his garland gone, walking behind the Buddha with his head bowed like a humble disciple. Her heart, which had been frozen with terror, now flooded with a relief so immense it was painful. The news spread like wildfire. Angulimala, the terror of Kosala, had been tamed by the Buddha. He had been accepted into the monastic order. This caused an uproar. King Pasenadi, who had been preparing his army for a final assault, was incredulous. The families of Angulimala's victims were outraged. They gathered in a great angry mob and marched to the Jetavana monastery, demanding justice. They wanted the monster handed over to them. The king, obligated to his people, led the procession. When they arrived at the monastery, the king approached the Buddha. "Blessed One," he said, "we have heard a disturbing rumor that you have given refuge to the murderer Angulimala. Is this true?" The Buddha nodded. "It is true, great king." "But he is a monster, a butcher," cried a man from the crowd whose son had been killed. "He deserves to be torn limb from limb. He cannot be allowed to hide behind a holy robe." The crowd roared in agreement. The Buddha raised a hand, and a silence fell. "Great king," he said, "suppose that man, Angulimala, the murderer, has now shaved his head and beard.
put on the saffron robe, and has undertaken the training of a monk. Suppose he now refrains from all killing, all stealing, all falsehood. Suppose he eats only one meal a day and lives a life of profound contemplation and harmlessness. What would you do to such a man? The king considered this. Well, Blessed One, if he were truly such a man, a monk, we would bow to him. We would offer him robes, food, and medicine. We would offer him protection. The Buddha then turned and gestured. From behind a tree, a new monk emerged. His head was shaved. He wore a fresh saffron robe, and his face, though etched with a deep and sorrowful remorse, was filled with a powerful newfound peace. It was Angulimala, but it was also not Angulimala. Great King, the Buddha said, this is the monk Angulimala. The crowd was stunned into silence. The transformation was so absolute, so profound, it was disorienting. They had come to kill a monster, but the monster was gone. In his place stood a holy man. King Pasenadi, deeply shaken, bowed his head. The anger of the crowd dissolved into a profound, bewildered awe. They dispersed, their quest for vengeance replaced by the unsettling miracle of redemption. But Angulimala's journey was far from over. The karmic consequences of his actions were a heavy debt that had to be paid. When he went on his daily alms round into the city, he was met not with reverence, but with hatred. People would see him and remember. They would scream curses at him. They would throw stones, sticks, and filth at him. "There's the man who killed my brother," one would cry. "He murdered my daughter," another would scream. Angulimala never flinched. He never retaliated. He simply accepted every blow, every curse, as a small payment on his immense debt. He would return to the monastery each day, his robe torn, his body bruised, his head bleeding from a thrown rock, and the Buddha would greet him with the same gentle words. "Bear it, Brahmin, bear it. You are experiencing here and now the results of deeds for which you might otherwise have been boiled in hell for millennia." Angulimala bore it all with a strength born of his profound remorse.
He became one of the most diligent monks, his practice fueled by the constant painful memory of his past. He meditated with a ferocious intensity, determined to purify his mind. One morning, while on his alms round, he came upon a house where a woman was in the midst of a terribly difficult and prolonged childbirth. Her screams of agony filled the air. Angulimala's heart, now so tender and open, was filled with an immense compassion for her suffering. He felt her pain as if it were his own. He returned to the Buddha and told him of the woman's plight. "What can I do, Blessed One? Is there any way to ease her suffering?" The Buddha looked at him and gave him a strange instruction. "Go back to her, Angulimala. Stand before her and make an act of truth. Say to her, 'Sister, since the day I was born in the noble birth of a monk, I have never intentionally harmed a single living being. By this truth, may you and your child be safe.'" Angulimala was taken aback. "But, Blessed One, how can I say that? It would be a lie. I have intentionally harmed hundreds of living beings." The Buddha's gaze was soft. "Then, Angulimala, go and say this: 'Sister, since the day I was born, I cannot recall that I have ever intentionally harmed a single living being.' This will not be true. Then try this: 'Sister, since the day I was born in the noble birth—'" "Ah, yes, you are right. That would be a lie. So go and say this: 'Sister, since I was born, I have never intentionally deprived a living being of life.' But no, that is also a lie. Let us try again. Ah, go to her and say, 'Sister, since the day of my noble birth—'" No, that is not it either. What about this? "Sister, since I was born, I have been born—" This is difficult. Let us try this. "Sister—" No.
I know. Go and say this. Sister, Wait, I have it. Sister, since I was born with the noble birth, I do not recall that I have ever intentionally deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. Angulimala looked at the Buddha, confused. But Blessed One, that would be a deliberate lie. I have killed so many. The Buddha looked at him with profound meaning. Then go and say this, Angulimala. Sister, since the day I was born into the noble discipline of the Aryan ones, I have never intentionally taken the life of a living being. By the power of this truth, may you be safe, and may your baby be safe. The distinction was crucial, since the day he was born into the noble discipline, since his ordination. He was no longer Ahimsaka the scholar or Angulimala the murderer. He was a new being. Angulimala understood. He returned to the house and stood at the door. He closed his eyes, centered his mind, and spoke the words with all the sincerity of his transformed heart. And as the truth of his new, harmless nature resonated in the air, a miracle occurred. The woman's suffering eased, and she delivered her child safely and without pain. This event, known as the Angulimala Komitta, became a powerful blessing for protection, one that is still chanted to this day. It was a sign that his spiritual power, once used for destruction, could now be used to heal. Not long after this, through his relentless, powerful meditation, Angulimala finally broke the last remaining fetters of his mind. He attained the state of an arhat, a fully enlightened being. He had walked from the deepest pit of hell to the highest peak of liberation, all within a single lifetime. He had paid his karmic debt, not just through enduring the stones and curses, but through the profound alchemy of his own spiritual transformation. He had become a living testament to the Buddha's most radical teaching, that no one, no matter how far they have fallen, is beyond redemption. That the seeds of enlightenment exist even in the heart of a murderer, waiting for the right conditions, the right compassion, to be watered and brought into the light. His story became a beacon of hope for all who felt trapped by their past, a powerful reminder that who we were does not have to define who we are or who we can become.
Let us begin again, recentering ourselves in this moment. Join me now wherever you are, and take the longest, slowest, deepest breath you have taken all day. Breathe in through your nose, feeling the air as cool and clean, filling your lungs, your belly, your entire torso with life-giving oxygen. Hold it for just a moment at the very top, and now release it all through your mouth with a soft, gentle sigh. Feel your body soften. Feel the day's concerns begin to drift away like clouds. As you settle more deeply into your comfort, take a moment to notice the world immediately around you. What sounds can you hear in the distance? What is the temperature of the air on your skin? Is the moon a bright sliver or a full luminous orb in your night sky? Or perhaps the sun is just beginning to wake, casting a soft golden glow upon your world. We acknowledge this moment, this place, and we connect across time and space in our shared intention for peace. Now, if you are ready, allow your eyes to gently drift closed. Let go of the world of seeing and enter the world of feeling, of listening. Let my voice be the vessel that carries you back through the mists of time, to a kingdom shrouded in a terrible fear, and the story of a man who became a monster. In the kingdom of Kosala, ruled by the kind and just King Pasenadi, a palpable silence had fallen. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of terror.
The bustling trade routes that were the kingdom's lifeblood had withered. The main highway through the dense and ancient Gelini forest, once a vibrant artery of commerce and travel, was now a dead thing, reclaimed by weeds and an eerie quiet. In the marketplaces of the capital, Shravasti, merchants spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously towards the western roads. Mothers pulled their children closer, telling them frightful stories to keep them from wandering too far. At night, the doors were not just closed, they were bolted, barred, and consecrated with protective charms. The source of this kingdom-wide paralysis was not an army, nor a pestilence, but a single man. A man who had become a legend, a nightmare made flesh. He was a ghost who haunted the Gelini forest, a predator of unparalleled ferocity and skill. To enter his domain was to accept a death sentence. The king, desperate to restore order, had sent his finest soldiers, first in small squads, then in entire platoons. None returned. They were found days later, their bodies left where they fell, a silent, gruesome testament to the killer's prowess. The man was known only by the name whispered in terror, Angulimala, the one with the garland of fingers. This was his horrifying trademark, an act of psychological warfare so profound it shattered the courage of the entire kingdom. After each life he took, he would sever a single finger and thread it onto a thick cord he wore around his neck. This grotesque necklace was a living, decaying record of his kills, a constant, stinking reminder of his monstrousness, bouncing against his chest as he ran through the forest he now called his own. The weight of this fear was immense. Let us pause for a moment and just feel the quality of that stillness. A stillness not of serenity, but of held breath, of listening for a footstep in the dark. It is the stillness of a hunted animal.
Breathe into that tension, acknowledge it, and then, with a slow exhale, let it go. We are safe here. We are only observers. But the tragedy, the deepest part of the horror, was that Angulimala was not born a monster. He was born into the light. His father was Bhagava Gaga, the royal chaplain to King Pasenadi himself, a man of great learning and stature. Upon his birth, the astrologers saw a strange and violent conjunction of stars. They told the chaplain, "This boy is born under the Robber's constellation. He is destined to become a great thief, a man of violence." But when the child was born, he was beautiful and serene, and his parents, filled with love, gave him a name that was a prayer, a shield against that dark prophecy, Ahimsaka, the harmless one. And for many years, he was the living embodiment of his name. He was a prodigy, blessed with a sharp, inquisitive mind, a powerful and graceful body, and a nature that was gentle, respectful, and unfailingly obedient. He was the perfect son, the perfect student. When he came of age, he was sent to the most prestigious university in all of India, the great center of learning at Taxila. There, under the tutelage of a renowned guru, his brilliance shone even brighter. He could grasp complex philosophical concepts in a single hearing, memorize entire texts after one reading, and master any physical discipline with ease. He was his guru's star pupil, and his devotion to his teacher was absolute. The guru's every word was scripture to him, his every wish a command. And it was this very devotion, this shining light of his brilliance, that would be his undoing.
His effortless excellence ignited a venomous jealousy in the hearts of his fellow students. They gathered in secret, their mediocrity binding them together in a shared resentment. They knew they could never surpass him in skill or intellect, so they resolved to destroy him through the poison of slander. They began a subtle, insidious campaign. One would go to the guru and say, with a voice full of false concern, "Master, I hesitate to speak, but I saw Angulimala in the courtyard, and the way he looked at your wife, it was not with the respect of a student." A few days later, another would approach. "Venerable teacher, Angulimala is growing arrogant. He told me yesterday that he already knows more than you, and that one day soon he will be the master of this university." They were clever, weaving a tapestry of lies so detailed and consistent that the guru, a man whose pride was as great as his learning, began to believe them. The trust he had for his favorite student curdled into suspicion, then into a cold, paranoid certainty. He now saw Angulimala not as his protégé, but as a dangerous rival, a serpent he had warmed at his own hearth, who was preparing to strike. He had to be eliminated. But Angulimala was too strong, too popular, and too beloved by the other teachers for a simple, direct punishment. The guru needed a plan that would not only remove Angulimala, but utterly destroy him, body and soul. He devised a scheme of such malevolent cruelty it could only have been born from a heart consumed by envy. He summoned Angulimala, his face an unreadable mask. "My dear Angulimala, your time with me is complete. You have learned all that I have to teach. You are ready to graduate. There is but one final task, the traditional Guru Dakshina, the parting gift of honor that you must provide. It is the final seal on your education." Angulimala, his heart swelling with pride and devotion, bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. "Master, your wish is my life's purpose. Ask anything of me and I shall do it." The guru's eyes turned to chips of ice. His voice lost all its warmth, becoming flat and metallic. "To fulfill your training and prove your ultimate loyalty," he said, "you must bring me a tribute of 1,000 human fingers, one right-hand index finger from 1,000 different individuals. When you present me with this garland, only then will your initiation into the deepest mysteries be complete." The world tilted on its axis for Angulimala. The command was so monstrous, so antithetical to his entire being that his mind could not process it. "Master," he gasped, recoiling as if struck, "how can you ask this? I am Angulimala, the harmless one. I come from a Brahmin family that would not even harm an insect. Killing is the greatest of sins. This cannot be what you mean." The guru's expression did not change. He said, "You question me? This is the ultimate test. It is an esoteric teaching far beyond your current understanding. Its purpose is to shatter your conventional morality and lead you to a higher, more ruthless state of being. To refuse is to prove that you are unworthy, that your devotion was a lie. To refuse is to carry the eternal curse of an ungrateful student. The choice is yours." Angulimala was trapped in an impossible dilemma. On one side was the bedrock of his identity, his name, his upbringing, his innate compassion. On the other was the pillar of his entire universe, the absolute, unquestionable authority of his guru. His mind, a brilliant and finely tuned instrument, began to buckle under the unbearable pressure. He reasoned that his guru, a man of such profound wisdom, could not possibly be asking him to commit a simple act of evil. There had to be a hidden meaning, a transcendent purpose that his limited intellect could not yet grasp. The sin of disobedience, of betraying his master, seemed a greater, more immediate spiritual death than the sin of killing strangers. And so, with his soul splintering, the gentle Angulimala made his fatal choice.
He chose obedience. He left the university that day a ghost of his former self. He found a blacksmith and acquired a long, sharp sword. He then walked into the dense, wild Jalini forest, a place where he could begin his horrific task in secret. The first time he took a life, the act itself almost killed him. He lay on the forest floor, vomiting and shaking uncontrollably, the screams of his victim echoing in his shattered mind. The scholar Ahimsaka died in that moment, and something else, something hard and broken, began to take his place. But the vow was a relentless fire in his brain, 1,000 fingers. He had to complete the task. He had to obey. With each subsequent murder, he built a thicker wall around his heart. He learned to shut down his thoughts, his empathy, his memory. He became a machine of violence, a creature of pure, brutal instinct. He was no longer Ahimsaka. He was the monster his actions had created, the thing the world would call Angulimala. He stopped counting days. He stopped noticing the seasons. His only calendar was the gruesome, ever-growing garland around his neck, its weight and stench a constant companion. He became a master of the forest, his senses sharpened to a predatory keenness, his humanity withering to a single, burning point of focus, the next finger. Now, after years of this living hell, he was on the verge of his goal. The rotting necklace held, by his careful count, 999 fingers. He needed only one more. Just one more, and this nightmare could end. He could return to his guru, present his ghastly gift, and perhaps, somehow, find his way back to being human. But the forest was now a dead zone. The roads were empty. The villages were abandoned. A frantic, feverish madness began to overtake him. He needed to finish. He craved the end of it with every fiber of his being. It was on this day, as he stood atop a high cliff, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape like a starving wolf, that his mad prayers were answered. He saw not one, but two figures. Far below, on the deserted road, a lone traveler in a saffron robe was walking calmly and deliberately towards the forest, and from the other direction, a woman was hurrying along the path, her voice faint on the wind, calling out a name, his name. "Ahimsaka, my son!" He recognized the voice instantly. It was his mother. She had heard that King Pasenadi was gathering the entire royal army for one final massive offensive to hunt him down and kill him, and she had come, at great risk to herself, to warn him, to beg him to flee. A terrible, twisted logic seized his broken mind. His vow did not specify whose finger it must be. The monk was an easy target, but his mother. If he took her finger, he would complete his vow instantly, and in a perverse way, he would be saving her from being caught and killed when the army arrived. The darkness had become so total that he now stood on the precipice of matricide, one of the most karmically ruinous acts a human can commit. He hefted his sword, its familiar weight a cold comfort in his hand, and began to bound down the rocks towards the small, hurrying figure of his own mother. Here we stand at the absolute nadir, the point of deepest darkness,
A brilliant soul, twisted by betrayal and dogma, is about to commit an unforgivable act. But it is always darkest just before the dawn, and the dawn was now walking towards him on the dusty road.
Just as Angulimala, his mind a maelstrom of madness and purpose, began his descent towards his mother, the solitary figure in the saffron robe intercepted his path. The monk did not stop, did not slow, did not even seem to notice the terrifying figure hurtling down the rocks. He simply continued his mindful, deliberate walk, placing himself directly between the predator and his prey. The sight of this monk, so calm, so fearless, so utterly indifferent to the terror that saturated the very air of this place, sent a jolt of pure fury through Angulimala. This was an insult to his power, a mockery of the fear he had so carefully cultivated. The final finger was here, delivered to him, a fool, begging for death. He changed his course mid-stride, his powerful legs carrying him effortlessly over the treacherous ground, his sword held high. "Stop, monk!" he roared, a bestial sound that had been the last thing hundreds had ever heard. "Stop where you are!" But the Buddha, for it was he, did not stop. He continued to walk. This was impossible. This was maddening. Angulimala broke into a run, the run that had made him a legend, a blur of motion that no one had ever escaped. He poured all his strength, all his rage, all his desperation into that chase. But the most bizarre and unnerving thing happened. Although the Buddha was only walking, and Angulimala was running at his absolute limit, the distance between them never closed. It was as if the very ground was stretching between them. Angulimala ran until his lungs burned and his muscles screamed in protest, the heavy, stinking garland of fingers slapping against his chest, a macabre metronome counting out his failure. He was trapped in a waking nightmare, a cycle of maximum effort and zero progress. It was the physical manifestation of his entire hellish existence. Let yourself feel, for just a moment, that profound exhaustion, the utter futility of running with all your might and getting nowhere. This is the essence of samsara, the cycle of suffering. Acknowledge this feeling, and with your next exhale, let it dissolve into the peace of this room. Finally, his physical strength and his sanity shattered, Angulimala screeched to a halt, planting his feet wide and screaming with all the air in his tortured lungs, "Stop, monk! I command you, stand still!" The Buddha, without breaking his serene pace, turned his head slightly. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it possessed a clarity and a resonance that seemed to quiet the entire forest. "I have stopped, Angulimala," he said. "It is you who have not." The contradiction stunned Angulimala into a momentary silence. "What nonsense is this?" he gasped, his chest heaving. "You are clearly walking, yet you claim to have stopped. I am the one standing still, yet you say I have not. Are you a madman or a liar?" At this, the Buddha finally paused. He turned his body to face the killer fully. He stood there, unarmed, radiating an aura of such profound, unshakable peace that it was like a cool balm on Angulimala's fevered mind. His eyes held no fear, no condemnation, only a vast, deep, and penetrating compassion. "Angulimala," he said, and his voice was the sound of pure reason. "I have stopped forever. I have stopped the act of killing. I have stopped creating suffering for myself and for others.
I have laid down all weapons, both physical and mental. My journey of violence is over."
But you are still running. Your body may be still, but your mind is racing in the endless cycle of hatred, craving, and delusion. You have not stopped harming living beings. You have not stopped creating the conditions for your own future torment. It is you, Angulimala, who must truly stop. The words were not an accusation. They were a diagnosis. They bypassed Angulimala's rage and his madness and spoke directly to the buried, intelligent soul of Ahimsaka. It was as if a bright light had been switched on in a dark, filthy room he had been living in for years. "I have stopped. It is you who have not stopped." In that instant, the entire artifice of his life collapsed. He saw the guru's cruel lie not as a sacred mystery, but as a petty act of jealous betrayal. He saw his own blind obedience not as a virtue, but as a catastrophic failure of wisdom. He looked down at the horrifying garland, no longer a tribute, but a necklace of his own damnation. He saw the faces of 999 men, women, and children. The horror, the guilt, the remorse that he had so brutally suppressed came roaring back, a tsunami of psychic pain that completely overwhelmed him. A sob of such profound agony tore from his soul that it seemed to shake the trees. It was the sound of a heart breaking, not into pieces, but breaking open. He dropped his sword. It clattered against the stones, a final, definitive sound of surrender. He fell to his knees in the dust, a broken, weeping giant. "You have walked into hell to find me," he cried, his voice thick with tears. "You have tamed the beast with nothing but your words and your courage. What hope is there for me? The evil I have done is as vast as the ocean. How can it ever be undone?" The Buddha moved closer and stood over the prostrate, shuddering form. "The past, Angulimala, is gone. It is like a shadow that disappears when the light is switched on. You cannot change it. But the present moment is in your hands. It is a fresh seed. What you plant now will determine your future. The path of harming is at an end. Let the path of healing begin." With hands that trembled violently, Angulimala reached up and fumbled with the clasp of his garland. He tore it from his neck and threw it from him. It landed in the dust with a soft, final thud. He then bowed his head to the ground at the Buddha's feet, the terrifying lord of the forest, now as humble and vulnerable as a newborn. "Let me follow you," he whispered. "Let me serve you. Let me spend every remaining breath of my life trying to purify the stain I have made upon the world." The Buddha led him from the forest, the great murderer walking behind him like a chastened child. The news of this event sent shockwaves through the kingdom. King Pasenadi, who was mobilizing his entire army, was astounded. The families of the victims, their grief still raw, were filled with a righteous fury. They formed a mob, brandishing farming tools and makeshift weapons, and marched on the Jetavana monastery, demanding that the monster be handed over to them for justice. The king met them there, his duty to his people warring with his reverence for the Buddha. He entered the monastery and confronted the enlightened one. "Blessed one, is it true? Have you truly given ordination to the butcher Angulimala?" The Buddha nodded serenely. "It is true, great king." "But this is an outrage," shouted a man from the crowd, his face contorted with grief. "He slaughtered my entire family. He deserves 1,000 deaths. He cannot be allowed to hide his evil behind a holy robe." The crowd roared its assent, a wave of anger and pain. The Buddha raised his hand for silence. "Great king, and all of you who have suffered so terribly, imagine for a moment. Suppose that very same man who brought you such pain
has now shaved his head and beard, has put on the simple saffron robe, and has devoted himself to the path of complete harmlessness. Suppose he now spends his days in meditation, purifying his mind, and his heart is filled with nothing but remorse and the wish for all beings to be well. If you were to encounter such a man, what would you do? The king, a just man, considered this deeply. Venerable sir, if such a transformation were even possible, if he were truly such a person, a holy man, we would not harm him. We would bow to him, offer him alms, and ensure his protection. The Buddha then turned and gestured to a figure standing quietly in the shade of a large sala tree. A monk emerged, his head shaven, his posture humble, his face a canvas of profound, sorrowful gravity, yet illuminated from within by a powerful new peace. It was unmistakably Angulimala, but all the monstrosity was gone, replaced by a deep and solemn sanctity. Great King, people of Kosala, I present to you the monk Angulimala. A collective gasp went through the mob. The cognitive dissonance was too great.
The being they saw before them simply did not match the monster in their minds. The fire of their rage, faced with the undeniable reality of this radical transformation, cooled into a bewildered, uncomfortable awe. They had come for a lynching, but their quarry no longer existed. Slowly, silently, the crowd dispersed, their thirst for vengeance unslaked, but their minds filled with a disquieting miracle. Angulimala's ordeal, however, was only just beginning. The law of karma is inexorable. The causes he had set in motion had to bear their fruit. When he would walk his morning alms round into Shravasti, he became a lightning rod for the city's residual pain. People would see him, and the old terror and hatred would surge. "Butcher," they would scream. "Murderer." They threw stones, garbage, and broken pottery at him. They beat him with sticks. Angulimala never resisted, never spoke a word in his own defense. He accepted every blow as a microscopic payment on his colossal debt. He would return to the monastery bruised, bleeding, his bowl empty and his robe in tatters. The Buddha would greet him with infinite compassion. "Bear it, noble one, bear it," he would say. "The suffering you endure now is but a pale shadow of the eons of agony you would have faced in lower realms for these same actions. Endure it with patience. You are burning away your dark karma in this very life." Angulimala's practice became legendary for its intensity. Fueled by his remorse, he meditated with a singular, ferocious focus, determined to uproot every last stain of defilement from his mind. One morning, on his alms round, he passed a house from which came the heart-rending screams of a woman in agonizingly difficult childbirth. Angulimala's heart, now so sensitive and open, was pierced by her suffering. He felt her pain as his own and rushed back to the Buddha. "Blessed One," he said, his voice filled with urgency, "there is a woman suffering terribly. Is there nothing that can be done?" The Buddha looked at him with deep meaning. "Go to her, Angulimala. Stand near her and perform an act of truth. Recite these words: 'Sister, since I was born with the noble birth in the discipline of the enlightened ones, I am not aware of having intentionally taken the life of any living being. By the power of this truth, may you and your child be well.'" Angulimala was stunned. "But Blessed One, that would be a conscious lie. I have killed hundreds." The Buddha's gaze was unwavering. "I did not say, since you were born from your mother's womb. I said, since you were born with the noble birth. The day you renounced your past and put on this robe, you were reborn. The being known as Angulimala the murderer died in the Jalani forest. You are the monk Angulimala, a new being. The statement is true." A profound understanding dawned on Angulimala. He returned to the suffering woman's house. He stood outside,
collected his mind into a state of deep, compassionate concentration, and spoke the words with the full force of his conviction. As the truth of his new, harmless nature radiated outwards, a miracle took place. The woman's labor pains ceased, and she delivered her baby with ease and safety. This blessing, the Angulimala Parita, became a legendary force for protection and healing, a symbol of how his spiritual power, once destructive, was now purely benevolent. Shortly thereafter, during a deep meditation, Angulimala's relentless efforts bore their final fruit. He sliced through the last, most subtle fetters of ego and delusion and attained the state of an arhat, a fully enlightened being. He had completed the journey. From the deepest pit of human depravity to the highest peak of spiritual attainment, all in a single extraordinary lifetime. He lived out the rest of his days in quiet sanctity, a silent walking testament to the Buddha's most profound message, that the human capacity for change is limitless, that no darkness is so complete that it can extinguish the innate seed of light, and that the path of redemption is open to anyone, at any time, who is willing to truly, finally, stop. The story is now complete. The journey is over. Let the deep peace of this resolution envelop you like a warm blanket. Allow yourself to feel the hope, the possibility of letting go of your own past, no matter what it holds. Who you were is a memory. Who you are in this moment is a choice. And in this moment, you choose peace. You choose rest. Let your body sink deeper into comfort, letting go of all effort. Let your mind be still. Let the gentle waves of your breath carry you out on a calm, peaceful sea, towards the shores of deep, dreamless, and restorative sleep. Rest now. You have earned it.